Let me share my screen. Can y'all hear me okay, first of all? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, this morning, we're going to spend a little while talking about effective impact statements. And moving forward, we've got a new format this year, which we're pretty excited about. And after today, I hope that you all will be too. I hope that it alleviates some of that heartburn that you may be having with some of the new format. But just to kind of give you a rundown or an agenda of what we hope to accomplish today, the first part, I'm going to talk about why we do impact statements specifically, how we use your impact statements for reporting and for sharing it with government officials and things of that nature. Then we're going to take about a 5-minute break or so, and then come back. And I've got a couple of Kahoot games built in. So to make this as interactive as possible, it makes it harder whenever you're trying to do everything through Zoom and try to be interactive. So, and with Kahoot, I'll put instructions up there, but you can use your cell phone or use a different browser to do those as well. Also want to say the PowerPoint will be available after the presentation. I wanted to be able to put those Kahoot answers in the PowerPoint for you all at the end. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is specifically what is impact and why are we writing these statements? Well, impact is that reportable and verifiable difference that a land grant program makes in its people. And I want to reiterate to you that we have to make sure that it's verifiable. So when you put that information in Super, and then you're going to use that information to write your impact statements going forward. Whenever you're thinking about drafting your impact statement, I want to encourage you to start with the end in mind, just like we do in any type of program development and program evaluation. Think about what you hope to accomplish with that impact statement and what exactly do you want the reader to know from your writing. An impact statement is a documented result of your extension program. And it demonstrates how that our work in extension makes a difference in the communities and the lives, the 4-Hers, the farmers, those individuals that participate in our FCS program, how we make a difference in their lives. So broadly speaking, impact tells us that a quality of life was enhanced. It lets us know that the economy was strengthened, the environment was protected. I know in the past few months and weeks, we've heard impact a lot because impact is often considered a political word. But for us in Extension, we want to think about that impact as being those outcomes that we have. And in a nutshell, your impact statement should tell your program story. And in a few slides, we're going to go through all the steps. But from the end of an impact statement, I hope to have a broad picture of what's going on within that specific program. So we've got a picture here that shows, it shows graphs, it shows kids graduating from college, it shows ideas, it shows savings with the piggy bank. And those are all things that we hope that an impact statement can capture in some way. So why do we write impact statements? I know this is probably your all's most favorite thing that you get to do each year is write your impact statements in the fall, but it is a very important part of the reporting process. And it helps us to communicate those results and the value of your work to others. It helps to create support for your projects and programs and support not only financial or monetarily, but also think about it as being able to get more volunteer support, possibly by people reading your impact statement. It is expected for accountability and reporting for us. And then also it's required for your annual evaluations and your promotions as well. But going back to continuing on why they are so important, the federal government requires us to write impact statements and report those to USDA and NIFA every year. So land grant universities, both 1890 and 1862 universities, we collect those impact statements and we write a report each year that goes to the federal government. And our report is a combination of our cooperative extension programs, but also ag research, and then the College of Agriculture as well. We all come together to write a big report that goes and showcases what Tennessee's been doing. Also on a federal level, keep in mind that your impact statements can be shared with members of Congress or other key decision makers. Impact statements are used to highlight the value of our work to the congressional delegation, members of the Tennessee General Assembly, and other supporters and stakeholders. Some of you all that know me know that I worked for a little while for the Tennessee General Assembly, and I can tell you firsthand that your Congress or your state legislators anyway, in that Ag Committee, they do look at your impact statements on occasion. I know whenever I worked for the chairman of the Ag Committee, he had me pull some specific Ag impact statements on occasion. So they are looked at. So it basically, once again, illustrates the importance of that land grant effort. It describes the positive change that we make in social, economic, and environmental conditions as well. It provides public accountability. It shows the economic value of our work in some cases, and shows a return on investment. Now, I know return on investment is often associated with an economic value, but I also think about return on investment as being a change that we have seen in the lives of somebody else, whether it's social, economic, or environmental. It's just basically letting the federal and the state government know that by giving us money, that we have had an impact or we have made a positive change in someone's life. So your impact does not always necessarily have to have an economic value associated with it. Now, if it's possible, we certainly would like to see that economic value, but the impact is much broader than something that you can put a dollar sign on. Continuing on, impact reporting, it just provides that accountability measure, shows that return on investment. It also helps us to foster a better understanding of the whole picture to those citizens in the state of Tennessee, and lets them know what Extension does in our outreach and our engagement phase as well. It also helps us to provide a reputation that improves future funding opportunities, whether you go for grants or something like that. It increases awareness of programs within the institution as well. And whenever I say that within the institution, President Boyd asks for economic impact and our impact statements every year, and so does the chancellor. So it is widely used, not only within us as Extension, but as the university as a whole as well. And also an impact statement can help us reflect and learn from our work and think about going back and thinking about your individual annual plans and what you hope to accomplish. And then whenever you're writing your impact statements, it's a way that you can see maybe how you want to change things in the future or how you can improve those as well. So whenever we think about the economic value of our work within impact statements, specific things that we would like to see is if you could put in there information about increased incomes, savings, increased productivity, value-added agricultural opportunities, the expected values of outcomes, if you have any willingness to pay, multiplier effects, increased quality of life. And those are just some examples just to try to kind of get you thinking towards those. That's not an exhaustive list by any means or anything that you specifically have to put in there. That's just to try to give you some ideas. So whenever we think about our audience, so who is our audience? Who are reading these impact statements? And part of my slide is gone, but we've already talked about those more specifically, but we've got state officials and federal officials, our local governments, especially look at our impact statements and how you report to your county commission, the general public, our peers in various counties, and then also in other states, external funding sources, and industry representatives. And this is just a short list. I mean, the list could go on and on of who our audience is with impact statements. But whenever we think about what these audiences do and what kind of power, for lack of a better term, they have some influence and control over our programs, what we do and the funds that we have associated with those. They want information for decision making and how to allocate those resources. They have several people competing for their attention and their money. And they also want to be able to see a quantifiable difference that has been brought by the investments in our programs within Extension. So I think more than ever in this day of COVID and budget constraints, it's probably more important now than ever that we are able to showcase once again that positive change that we are making in the lives of our communities, and justifying that return on investment, if you will, for why that they should continue supporting. So I'm going to jump now really quick of just thinking about what you write in your impact statement, what the format is, and then a little bit later on, we're going to talk about what makes a great statement and then also the preferred writing style. But an impact statement briefly summarizes, and I've got briefly italicized there because we do want it brief. You are limited to 6,000 characters per box or per statement. It just basically is the difference that you're making. Once again, I've said that several times, but it's the difference that you are making and what your extension and outreach efforts have impacted. It states accomplishment and creates strong support for your programs. It answers questions of so what and who cares. And then also it just conveys that accomplishment in simple language. You want to, whenever you're thinking about your impact statement and what they should include, is you want to be sure to address how many people that you've served, talk about the problem that's been addressed, the way in which indicators were measured, or if you did an evaluation, for example, did you do a pre-test, post-test? Did you do an interview with some of your participants? Be sure to address that some way in your impact statement. And then also show indicators of impact, put facts and figures in your impact statement. And then also other indicators that demonstrate a practice change or improve social, economic, environmental changes. So you also want to make sure that for those, my mind just left me there, but your CASA outcomes, so your improvements in knowledge, attitude, skills, and aspirations in your outcome indicators, those positive changes in practice or behavior, and then also, once again, those improvements in that social, economic, and environmental conditions. So now jumping gears on how we specifically use your impact statements, we generate a statewide economic impact report each year. And so we use your impact statements to generate this number. And we gather this information and we break it out into FCS and then also A&R programs. But you can see from this is also available on our website if you want to look at this report in more detail. But in 2019, we had a statewide economic impact of over $687 million. And we helped or maintain or created or maintained over 8,600 jobs in the state of Tennessee. So this is an impact statement report that is sent to the legislature. It's sent to Congress, congressional members as well. And then more specifically, it's sent across the bridge to Randy Boyd's office and the chancellor's office as well. Those are specific things that they ask for each year. And it's also important, they are encouraging us to show an increase every year as well. Another way that we use your impact statements is for the big report that I mentioned very briefly earlier, but we have the annual report of accomplishments and results. And again, that report is in conjunction with Ag Research and then also the College of Agriculture here in Knoxville. And we basically just take your impact statements and we go through and we highlight things that we want to make sure that's included in the big report. This year, the report was about 300 pages long. And then also on the other side, I always get confused on Zoom on how it is focused for you, but on my right is the plan of work that we do. And think about that as the individual annual plan for the whole institute. And so we work on that and use your impact statements from the previous year to help us draft that plan of work for the next 4 years. And then the last way that we use your impact statements is we have the Land Grant Impact Database. And so this is a database that is generated for all of the land grant universities. And what we do is we take the best impact statements and we publish those for everyone to see, and our peer institutions can see these impacts, and also the general public. Right now, Tennessee has the most impacts of any other institution in there right now. I looked this morning and we've got over 58 impacts for the state of Tennessee. So that's just a way that we can go on and see what's going on in North Carolina or Washington State or Mississippi or wherever, and see how our programs are matching or how they're different, and also maybe get ideas for your own program. So you can search that as well. Some important things to remember whenever you're thinking about this first section is remember to submit your impact statements in Super, the new Super. Your character limit is 6,000 for each of those sections. And you want one impact statement report for each of your plan programs, and then one for your base programs. And then also, if you're a county director, you'll have an impact statement for that as well. Also, keep in mind that your due date is December the 1st of this year. And really quickly, before we go to the break in the Kahoot game, I'm just going to show you Super 2, just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about and that you're familiar with this one. Let me just stop my screen. So this is Super, and your facing may look a little bit different than mine, but you're going to go over into delivery, and that's where you'll put your impact statements. And it should be able to show you each of those boxes. And again, you'll have a 6,000 character limit for each of those. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. So at this point, I'd like for us to take about a 5-minute break or so. So we'll come back at, let's say we'll come back at 9:55, and we'll do a little Kahoot game. And then we'll start on getting into the nitty gritty of the different parts of the new impact statement. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the Kahoot game. If you want to play, if you don't want to play, that's fine too. That's completely up to you. But if you'll just go to the web address there on your screen, and you can do it with your phone or in a different browser. And then the pin is at the very bottom. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the Kahoot page, and you'll still be able to see the pin here in just a second. This worked earlier, and watch it not work for me now. Sometimes you have to love technology. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start it. Pretty easy right there in front of my face, and I couldn't see it, but it's okay. Yeah. So impact is those reportable and verifiable changes in your people. And it is outcome. We associate impact with outcomes as well. So those are both right. But what the answer we were looking for in this one was those reportable and verifiable changes in your people. So where do I upload my impact statement? Yep, you want to make sure that it's in the new Super 2 in that delivery mode, and in there by December the 1st. So true or false, impact statement should tell a story. Absolutely. We want to see what's going on in your county and in your program, and tell us a story how that has happened. So what's the character count limit for your impact statement? It should say for each box, but for each box, what's your character count limit? Yeah, 6,000. And that includes spaces. It takes quite a bit to get to 6,000 though sometimes. Yeah, impact statements are due December the 1st. So thank you all for playing it. We're going to play one more. And I just tried to do that just to make it a little bit interactive in this Zoom environment. So the next part of the training, we're going to talk about the new impact statement formula and the new impact statements. And also, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to unmute and ask away. You're not going to bother me at all. So whenever we're thinking about the impact statements, and they are new format, but think about it as following a simple formula, and it's basically R cubed plus PV equals your impact. And so we're going to talk about those 3 R's and then what PV is as well. So the first R is relevance. And this is your old issue statement from previous impact statements, and then also your individual annual plan. And that should automatically populate in Super. Whenever you go to write your impact statement, it should pull from your plan. The second R is your response. Your third R is your results or your impacts. And then that fourth part is the PV, which is the new public value statement. And so all those come together and they create your impact. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the coming slides, but those first 3 steps, those first 3 R's are really what the impact, if you will, that you have made with your participants, those individuals that have come to your classes, participated in your programs. And then that fourth one, that public value statement, is the greater good that Extension has on the entire community. And like I said, we'll talk about that and give examples in the next few slides. So the first R is that relevance. Once again, that's going to come from your plan. it's your purpose statement. Why did you do what you did? You want to describe your issues, and just tell that there. And once again, it should pull over into the new super. If it doesn't, just call us and we'll see what the problem is. But whenever you're thinking about explaining the issue or problem, you want to think about the context, the clientele, your goals, any of your identified or prioritized needs that you have there as well. So some questions to consider are: discuss how the people are affected. What were the needs of the people? What were the needs of the industry in your county? What were the needs of the families? And why are these needs important to Tennesseans? And is the scope greater than Tennessee? That's also some things to keep in mind as well. Like I said, it should populate over. You do have the opportunity and the ability to edit that. So if you see a change that you need to make in that relevant section, you certainly can do that, but it should come on over. And one thing that you don't have to worry about writing in your impact statement. So I've got some examples in each R that we go through. I've got some examples of some old impact statements, but some that are still good and still relevant to how we could write these different sections. So this is an example. This is an FCS example. Again, this is from several years ago, but you can read that. But it's just talking about, in their relevant statement, they talk about Tennessee's rate of divorces, talking about statistics with children whose parents are divorced have higher rates of different academic issues or higher risk behaviors. So that was these are specialist impact statements, but that was their relevance part. Then for the A&R side, we've got a relevant statement that's talking about precision agriculture and the rising cost of fertilizers and chemicals and seed, and then how that they are adopting precision agriculture to help reduce those input costs and manage farmland more efficiently. So the second R is your responses. And so this is your action statement. And this is where you're going to briefly describe what you did. And I've got briefly there bolded and underlined. We don't want to necessarily know every single thing that you did in 2020, because we can go back and we can pull your activities reports from Super. What we'd like to see in your impact statement are those activities that specifically relate to those outcomes and outcome indicators you're going to talk about in the results and also the public value statement part of it. So once again, just briefly tell me what you have done in 2020. I don't need a laundry list of what all's been done. If I need more specifics, I will call you or I'll pull your activity statement. Think about your methods whenever you're doing your response. These are your activities and your outputs. And then also think about participation. Include that information there as well. And then also, if you've done any collaborations or you have partners, be sure to include that in your response section as well. So whenever we're thinking about your activities and your outputs that you want to include in that response section, be sure to tell about the workshops and the field days that you have done, your farm visits, education presentations, and if you've done any publications or any newsletters in that part, be sure to include that. So once again, we're going to go through those examples. This is the response that is hinged on those two previous relevant statements that we have. So the FCS one, talking about the divorce rates and the relevance, this is what their response is. So they tell me how many contacts they made through client visits, through direct mail. And I know now we don't have direct contacts anymore. They're all contacts in Super, but you kind of get the gist of what we want to see in a response. And they tell me what specific program it's associated with. And then she also gives an example of exhibits and the newspaper articles. So the response for the precision agriculture, this specialist told about field days and then the county meetings that they had, news articles. We'd like to see maybe specific numbers, but this is okay. And talks about their approach, their multidisciplinary research and education outreach programs to develop and disseminate information about precision agriculture. And one other thing I'll note about these two you'll notice they're pretty short. They're 3 to 4 sentences and that is it. And so, we want you to be succinct. We want you to be brief. You don't have to feel like you have to write a book. Just get the information to us that we need to know and be as quick as possible. So that third R is the results. And this should be your longest section. This is where your outcomes are really going to come into play. So in this section, we want you to show the impact of your work. And like we've talked about in that first section, it's what is the payoff? Whether it's social, economic, or environmental, what was the impact? What happened to your audience as a result of the work that you have done in your county? Tell us what knowledge was gained, what skills were increased, what practices or behaviors changed, and then how many people changed. If it's one that you can put an economic value on, tell me how much money you were saved. If there were policies that changed as a result, and then also finally what the end results specifically were, both qualitative and quantitative. So also we'd like to know how the evidence was collected. This goes back to that reportable and verifiable piece that I talked about in that first slide. We just want to make sure that we can verify the numbers and the impact that you are showing. So if you did a survey, if you did an interview, be sure to tell that some way in your impact statement. And then also what the scope of the impact statement was. I think this would probably be more for our area specialists, but tell us about the counties. Was it regional? Was it statewide? If you do a multi-county project, be sure to tell us it was multi-county. Also keep in mind, think about the various cities and communities in your county. Tell me if it was county-wide or if it was community-specific. So whenever we're thinking about outcomes and impacts, so those changes in learning, which are those beginning outcomes that we have, or those CASA, those knowledge, attitude, and skills that we have as our outcome indicators. The changes in action are our intermediate impacts, and that's when we see the behavior or our practice change that we have. And then changes in conditions. Those are our social and health, economic, and environmental. Those are our long-term condition changes, long-term impacts. And I know that it's hard to be able to get those higher level outcome indicators and impact statements because most of our programs are a 1 to 2 year program, or it's a yearly program. So sometimes it's harder to get those, and that's okay. But those are some things to keep in mind. And then also I've got on there changes in policy or decision making. Those sometimes can come about as well. But be specific and quantify in your results part. Include your outcome indicators. I think, now don't hold me to this, I haven't got in there and played with it a lot, but I think some of your outcome indicators will automatically populate just like it did in the old system. And so you want to go through and refine those outcome indicators to talk specifically to address what you talked about in your relevance and your response. But here are just some examples of outcome indicators, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Those outcome indicators for beef producers, a number of bulls that you used, to have greater genetic potential on so many heads of calves and increase returns by so much money. For the FCS agents, the relaxed management program, if you're doing that in your county, be sure to include the number of participants. I also know in the past, you typically have used percentages, and that's okay. But in addition to those percentages, I would like for you to have blank of blank did this. I can calculate your percentages. So I know that percentages sometimes flow a little bit better when you're telling your story and you're writing your impact statements. But be sure to put in parentheses or something to tell me, 8 out of 10 participants completed this versus just telling me, 80%. So here's
Hannah, if I could
examples.
interrupt for just a second.
Yes, sir.
There were some updates to outcome indicators. So for the agriculture extension agents, I shared those this morning, and we want to make sure that we use the new outcome indicators in the impact statement. And it does give you a lot more flexibility when you go into your impact statement now with Super 2.0 to make sure that you can get a hold of the correct outcomes. So I don't think anybody will have any trouble with that. From what I've seen, I think you may have to add those outcomes. I'm not sure if they load, but it's great if they do. So that I'm just not totally clear on that yet. But thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, and Ty, on that point, you're right. The new ones, they are not automatically uploading. We're still working on that. Hopefully, maybe by the first of the year, we'll have those, which won't help us any this year, but those changes to next year, they should automatically pop.
And Hannah, if you could go back to that last slide for just a second, I just wanted to encourage agents that even if you only have like 2 or 3 people that do something, but it's very significant, if they go through a gap training or get set up with a something that's very impactful, even those small numbers are significant. So don't hesitate to include those in outcome indicators. And when you add those up across the whole state, they really do show a significant impact statewide. So don't be afraid to have small numbers in there too.
Absolutely. That's a very good point.
Hannah, this is Linda. So I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So agents are working on their impact statements for 2020 now.
Right.
And so are you saying, and again, I haven't looked at it and the agents may be able to give me some guidance on this, but the outcome indicators from their plan last year and Super Classic used to just automatically load into their impact statement. They are not loading in? Is that?
For FCS, they should be loading because we did not make any changes to those outcome indicators. A&R agents should be the only one that's affected because we had to make some changes.
Okay.
So
we make changes, but that is for 2021.
Right. Okay. So we should be in good shape by the time 2021 rolls around.
I needed that for my own clarification. Thank you, Hannah.
Yes.
All right, Hannah, I need to interrupt just a minute. David Tarrant.
Yes, sir.
My clarification. At some point in this slide said, are you going to distinguish the difference from impact statements that are attached to their individual annual plan and versus base programs? Because that's got to be discussed somewhere in here. And I just wondered, where do you intend to cover that?
It is at the very end.
Okay. All right.
David, I'd love for you to jump in though, and talk more specifically about
when you get there, I'll be fine. I'm gonna stay with you the whole time.
Okay. All right. Good deal. So here's an example of going, once again, hinging on those other 2 examples that we've shown, is showing a result statement. So for this individual's results, they tell me how many participants they had and then bulleted, and I encourage you to use bullets. It's a lot easier to read. They tell me that 2,089 out of 2,257 participants improved knowledge of how divorce impacts the children. And then they've got the 93% in parentheses. So that was what I was referring to a few minutes ago about be sure to tell me, the number out of blank participants, and then you can include that percentage, but just be sure to let me know exactly how many, because and then they included about 4 outcome indicators that were relevant to their specific program. And then in that second paragraph, they tell me that they did an independent evaluation, doing a post-test, pre-test, and then 139 participants reported knowledge gain in 2 specific areas.
Hannah?
Yes, ma'am.
If our indicators populate, we don't need to retype them in the statement, correct?
Correct. What you will need to do is you will need to edit those, however, because it should populate all of your outcome indicators. So you'll need to edit the ones that you're specifically talking about in your impact statement, if that makes sense. because, and we'll get into this in a few minutes, but you'll have to do an impact statement on each of your plan programs, and then also one on your base programs. So with your plan, you may have several outcome indicators that will go with all that you were hoping to accomplish in that year, but you'll just need to make sure that your impact statement covers the specific ones that you're talking about for that specific plan program. And so this is the result statement for that A&R one. And it just basically tells us that the educational effort from UT and the adoption of precision agriculture technologies resulted in over 575,000 acres planted and managed using precision agriculture technologies. So these are very specific to your outcome indicators and how you want to word these and share information. I will say, don't only include your outcome indicators. We would like some verbiage also associated with those going forward. And at the very end, we're going to go through some examples. You all will have this slideshow available so that you can look at those examples, and then also know that you're more than welcome to reach out to me or your program leaders, and we'll certainly help you as much as we can. I'll also say this before I go any further, because I think the next one is public value. And I will defer to David and Linda, and Nancy, and Ty on this. But from my perspective, looking at your impact statements on the state level, I think that we're truly going to have to embrace the 4-H model of learn by doing this year. And it's going to take, it's new for all of us. And so this year is kind of a lack of a better term, it's a practice run. And hopefully next year we can have another training and show you more specifics on how to write these and refine these going forward. But it's just going to be, it's a learning year for all of us and a learning curve going forward.
Hannah, can I go and jump in there?
Absolutely.
I'll help bail you out there.
Okay.
I think that was a very good statement because it was one I was going to word a little differently and present to the group. Because here's the thing. Everyone in the Eastern region has to write an impact statement. If you're an agent and area specialist, you're going to have to recognize that 2020, starting in March, it's been nothing but change, adjustment, anxiety, and all. So please don't let the anxiety and the change get the best of you in this, because here's the thing. The group of people that are going to read these and have to decide is it good as it is on this meeting right now. That's Ty, that's Linda, that's Nancy, that's Hannah, and that's myself. And recognizing that for 2019, the fact that, remember, impact statements are the base for your performance appraisal score, we're going to transfer, unless you tell me you want to do it again or do it enhanced, we're going to transfer your score from 2019 and it's going to be good for 2020. Unless you're brand new, you didn't have a score last year, or there was someone that wants to have one. So it is going to be an opportunity for us to get in here and practice with this and learn the nuances of, all right, are all the impact statements going to, those outcome indicators, are they going to populate? Where we've changed outcome indicators, how are we going to fix that? Because the key is everybody has at least one plan. Some of you have 2 plans. So for those 2 plans, either 1 or 2, you'll have to write an impact statement, and there'll have to be verbiage in every one of those 4 sections, the 4 R's and the public value. But for your base program, you don't. And when we get to the end of that, I'm going to help Hannah out and go through that, because we've distributed that through the county directors. But that's why I wanted to be with you all the way today. And the bottom line is, I don't want you to fret about it. We'll work through it. And if it's not perfect this year, it's not going to be a big issue. And if you have a question about it, you want to direct that to either one of the 5 of us, that's just fine. I don't know if Mitch is on here or not. He will look at some of those, but it's our program leaders and myself are the ones that we will be checking them just to see how they're going. Did that help, Hannah? Maybe words that you weren't sure of?
Yes.
Okay.
That's perfect.
All right.
Thank you. So we want you to focus on your impacts. Focus on that results section. That should be your longest section. That's where you should spend the most of your time, is that third R, which is the results and the impact. And this is basically, once again, just thinking about how the clientele, how your area benefited from those activities that you talked about in that previous block. So whenever you're thinking about whether to include this, and I'm sure several of you all have seen this before, but maybe for some of the newer agents, I'm a visual learner, so this was a great way for me to be able to write things out, is thinking about what section do I put things in, and asking myself, is this an input, is this an output, or should this go in my outcome section? And so hopefully this example will help you a little bit, but we're going to use a logic model. And this just basically, a logic model helps you to connect your work with your ultimate impact. And so the logic model just is that chain of connections that shows what the program intends to accomplish. And the thing that's consistent there at the bottom is time. So the first thing you're going to think about is your issue. So that's that first R, that's that relevant statement that you've already talked about in your plan. And once again, we hope will populate over. But that's your situation. That's the background. That's the rationale. That's your client's needs, where you've done your needs assessment, any goals that you have for that year and for that program. Then that second part is what we invest. So this is your activities. These are your inputs. This is your time, your volunteers, your research that you've done to help identify what programs that you want to implement in your county. And then what you did. This is your activities. These are your methods. This is your outputs, your participation, your products. This is that second R of the response. That's what you did. And then the results are where we see those three outcomes, whether that's the learning outcomes, those CASA, the knowledge, attitude, and skills, your action outcomes, behaviors and policy changes, and then those long-term condition changes, where we've seen a change in social, economic, or environmental changes. So that might be a way that you can visualize, and I can send you a blank logic model with this PowerPoint. That way that you can write in different things and help you kind of visualize how you want things to look in your impact statement. We've already talked about those, but just thinking about your outcome change, those CASA, or the short-term outcomes, your medium terms, or those actions, and then the long-term are those condition changes. So here's an example of using that logic model. So keep in mind, you're thinking about the whole time, what difference are we making in that community? So the learning part is, participants gain knowledge and skills about food gardening. Your action item is that number that maybe started growing edibles, they expanded varieties, they decreased food loss, they donated produce, or participated in a community garden. And then that condition change would be an increased access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So that's thinking about how to put those outcome chains together for those three different types. And then I've got over there in yellow, and we're going to talk about that in the next session, but that yellow box is your public value. Overall, because of the information that your participants learned, the action that they put in place, and then that condition change that they had, their overall impact on the community is improved food security. That's your public value. So we're going to transition into that this is the brand new part of the impact statement, and this is the public value. And so whenever you think about the public value definition, it's evidence-based plus return on investment for funding, and that's your public value movement. And so think about it this way. It's the benefit that extension programs have to those who are not directly served. So it's those that, say you've got, bear with me on my examples, but say you've got 50 beef producers in Ray County, and 25 of those have participated in extension programs, and the other 25 have not. But the whole community, or the whole Ray County beef programs or beef area in that county, are going to improve because those 25 individuals participated in your programs, and they're going to go down the road and tell Farmer Brown, hey, I've done this and this through extension, and it's helped me return my investment in funding have a return on investment. Maybe you should do it next year too. And then also, hopefully, they may buy bulls or they may buy calves from that individual. And so it's directly feeding into the community as a whole. So your public value is that benefit to those that are not directly affected by those or not directly served by us in extension. So think about your public value statement being your program's elevator speech. So what would you want somebody to know in an elevator ride about your program, and keep it to 3 to 4 sentences at the most. And once again, we're going to show you examples at the very end. But it's a map of your program. It just gives that good synopsis of what's going on. And also, whenever you're thinking about your public value statement, you want to help determine what impact you want to measure there. And then, collect and analyze data, that may be more for specialists, but that might be important too as well. But tell the public value that's tied to the research and the evidence that you have in your county. So whenever you're articulating that value of the public value of your work, you want to make that an explicit connection of how your program outcomes contribute to the community. And if applicable and available, you want to make sure that you've included those condition change indicators. And an extension specialist from the University of Minnesota talked about that public value is the value of a program to those who are not directly benefited from that program. So think of it as maybe this is their window of being able to see what extension programs can do and how they truly impact everyone in the community, not just your participants. So what's the difference in a private value, which would be those first 3 R's that you've had the value to your participants, and public value? Well, private value is those program participant outcomes that we have. And public value are those longer term condition change outcomes, those economic, social, and environmental changes that we have. So I'm going to give you some examples of private versus public value. So we're going to start off with 4-H. So private is because of your 4-H program, you stay out of court. But the public value is that there's been reduced court and human service costs as a result of that program. For A&R and family consumer sciences, so a private is growers used improved methods, technologies, and practices. And the public is they've improved the rural economy and environment for that entire county or that entire community. So another example, so specifically for A&R, so we've got a water quality education program. The private is those participants saved X amount of money by reducing the use of pesticides and herbicides. And public is that we've improved water quality. For an FCS example, we use nutrition education. The private is that because of our participants, they've improved individual health by increasing intakes of fresh fruit and vegetables. And then the overall picture for public is that we've decreased healthcare costs as a result. Before I go forward with the next slide, I'll also point out, I've talked a lot about making sure that it's reportable and verifiable. And I'm sure some of you are scratching your head thinking, well, how can I verify that I have really improved water quality or that I have really decreased healthcare costs? Well, with public value, we're just going to go with anecdotal evidence. And that's what the consensus is among the cooperative extension system, is that we want to make sure that we can verify those 3 R's, and then that public value is just anecdotal evidence, what we believe will truly have an impact on the public as a result. So here are some common public values that have been used: decreased healthcare cost, decreased public cost related to risky behavior or financial problems, decreased public response cost in emergencies and disasters, increased academic success for highly qualified and productive workforce. And what I did was I pulled these from other states. Several of the states have been using public values for a while, so I just went into some of their impact statements and pulled these from their common public values that I saw. decrease public costs related to the dependency on local, state, and federal services, increase health and ability of public safety workers, decrease lives lost. We've increased the quality of jobs, decrease the cost of consumer goods, improved environmental quality, increase global competitiveness, and then increase civic engagement of citizens. Those are just some examples of common public values that we have. I will say this, that in the works is those work groups that you're familiar with and those leadership groups that work on your outcome indicators. One of the goals for those workforces or work groups are to come up with public values that we can associate with those outcome indicators. So for the next year or so, we'll probably ask you to write your own public values, but hopefully coming down the road, coming down the pike is those common public values will be associated with those outcome indicators. So whenever you're thinking about your public value statement and your impact statement in a whole, I want you to think about this quote by John Bayer. It was on a podcast I was listening to about a month or so ago when I was working on some of these presentations, but he talked about measuring what you value and others will value what you measure. So think about what you think is important, what you think about is important to showcase, what you think is important to measure and show those outcome indicators. And then others will value what you have done and see the work of what the fruits of your labor, if you will. And I think it also ties into also going back in extension and thinking about, people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I think that if we can apply those approaches to our impact statements and thinking about that in reporting these, that can help us moving forward. So I'm going to show you just a brief example of a public value statement. And I'll be honest, like I said earlier, it's a learning curve for all of us thinking about this new public value statement. And whenever I first started in January and February, I was convinced that a public value statement meant that you had to have an economic value associated with it. And the more that I've learned and went to trainings and researched, I realized that, it's not necessarily, does it have to have an economic value associated with it. So these are just some examples to kind of maybe help you think through writing your public value statement. I will be honest, some of these do have economic values in it and some of them don't. But when we think about maybe an environmental stewardship example, you realize that you're going back to a response. Producers assess nutrient needs by conducting soil samples. And then as a result of that, the producers utilized UT fertility recommendations on fertilizer cost. And then the public value is by reducing fertilizer cost and the tons of excess fertilizer, then we decreased potentially offsite and the environmental degradation on so many number of acres. That's the public value because that's impacted everybody. So on nutrition education, we talked about low-income adults. They increased their intake of fruit and vegetables. As a result, they have improved health, and we've documented that. And our public value is that we've improved the community health and wellness overall. So those are just to try to kind of help you think about using those 3 R's to help craft your public value statement that you're going to have. So I think I've got a couple more slides before we take a little bit longer break and we'll play another Kahoot, and then we'll get into examples and then talking more specifically about your base program and your plan program impact statements. But keep in mind that well-written impact statements, they provide a holistic picture of your overall programming. They emphasize your outcomes and your impacts. They're written succinctly, and you'll show the examples that I've shown before, and then even the examples that we'll have at the very end. We're talking, 5-6 sentences at the max. So be brief, write succinctly. Do not include that detailed activity information. Once again, I can go and pull your activity reports. Just tell me what is specifically needed for you to tell me your outcomes and your impacts. Some important questions to keep in mind are: who cares about this issue? What was Extension's response to the issue? And what was the result of this response? You want to show improvements in quality of life if it's applicable, show that economic value if you have it, environmental quality, social well-being, health and well-being, things of that nature. Also keep in mind whenever you are writing your impact statements, don't use the phrases that are in future tense or, could impact or potentially or can help, could result. We want to use active voice. So keep that in mind whenever you're writing that. Use words and phrases like impacted by, helped by, improved, demonstrated, enabled, saved, eliminated. Those are ones that we want to see. So once again, some tips for great impact statements are to be brief. Tell me the number of participants, numbers that show a change in their quality of life. The longest part should be that third R, your results, your impact. And that goes along with focus on those outcomes and impacts and not the activities. So again, focus on your outcomes, not your activities and outputs. That's very important. Once again, I can pull your activity statement. We want you to focus on that results section. Be specific about your participants' behavior change. Briefly talk about your evaluation methods. Going back to the one specialist example that we had for FCS, she talked about that pre-test, post-test evaluation that she did. Articulate that public value of your work and tie that in. And make that explicit connection of how your program's outcomes contributed. And if applicable, you want to include those outcome change indicators. And be sure to include numbers and quantification whenever you're writing your impact statement. So some most common pitfalls of impact statements are they're too long and you've tried to give me a laundry list and tell me exactly everything that you've done in 2020. And that's not the impact statement's not the appropriate place for that. Also, poor timing or writing about a program when there's no end results. So if you've just started a program, you may want to briefly mention that program, but you may not necessarily want to put outcome indicators or tell me about the impact because you've not yet achieved those end results yet. You may be halfway through a program or just started. Listing those activities, but you didn't tell me about them, talk about them in the results. Including too much program planning information, such as the list of curriculum that you used and the list of objectives. We don't need to see that in your impact statement. We've got that in your plan. So just keep in mind, I guess the biggest thing is you've just got two separate documents. You've got your plan and then you've got your impact statement. And some things are going to overlap, but there are some specific ways that we need them to be different. Keep in mind, once again, we do not necessarily need to report everything that we do in an impact statement. We want to report on those programs that have measurable impact. And also keep in mind that it takes multiple years before a program's impact is achieved. So if you've got those learning, those short-term and intermediate outcome changes, that's all that you can talk about at that point in time, that's okay. Because it's going to take multiple years sometimes before we see those condition changes. So at this time, I'd like to take about a 10-minute or so break, get up, stretch your legs, use the restroom, whatever you need to do, and we'll come back about 10:50. We'll play another Kahoot game and then talk about examples and then talk more specifically about your base program and plan program impact statements. I have to do that. Your medium-term outcome change is those actions and behavior, that green. So for the sake of time, we're just going to go ahead and skip that one. Action behavior. So what can help you connect your work to the ultimate impact? That logic model. So true or false, public value is a program participant outcomes. So this is your extension participant outcomes. That's right. Your public value is the value to those individuals who do not participate in your program. Your extension participants are your private value. Right. So what should be your longest section? Your results. That's your results and your impact are one and the same. Right. So final question, true or false, outcomes equal results? Yes, your outcomes are your results. All right. That's all on that. So it'll put up the winners there. All right. So let me get back to the PowerPoint. All right. So does anybody have any questions before we jump into some examples? And then at the end, I'm going to go back into super, and then we'll talk about those base and plan programs.
Hannah, I do have one. This is Lee in Knox County.
Yes.
So back in June, I think some of us were requested to do a direct COVID-19 response impact report. And I'm noticing in super that information is still in here. Do we start a new impact statement, or will I delete this old information? How do I do my 2020 impact statement now at the end of the year?
So you can add on to that one, or you can delete that. That's what my understanding. David, Linda, Ty, Nancy, you all may have different instructions for them. But I will say this, I have captured all of those COVID impacts. So if you do delete them and you still need it for the future, I've got those, but I'll defer to them to see what their preference would be for you all.
I would just comment that that's still very valid impact for 2020. So I wouldn't want to necessarily delete it. I think add to it, or maybe move it into the appropriate spot if it goes with a plan or if it goes with a base program. I think for the most part, we'd want to hold on to that impact that you've gathered.
Yes, just leave it in there.
Okay.
And if you wanted to, you could even put the word COVID there and move it around, add the new up to the top, but don't delete it, because the worst thing we want to do is it's saving evidence of what we've done. So there's going to be at the future, if anybody says, well, what happened, and everybody's deleted it, Hannah's the only holder of it. And that's not, that's what super's intended to be, is keep a record of what we've done.
So the one issue that you may run into is you may run out of space with those characters. So if that happens, you just kind of have to manage it the best you can. You may need to combine a little bit, but we sure don't want to lose that.
Okay. Thank you.
You could go in and, since you're going to add more to it, read it and keep the essence of what's there, but for unnecessary word and condense it. definitely want, I mean, definitely it needs to be in there because that's impact for 2020. I think that's the hard part when you think about the relevant the results and the results is being able to put it in there. And Hannah's talked about that, it being very succinct in what you do. And again, I would think she talked about using bullets. And so if you're going to do that, you need to do that in Word and then copy it into Super.
Well, we'll jump into examples. And again, feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. But we'll go ahead with those examples. So the first thing that the first set of examples are SCS examples. And then I'm just going to refresh your memory of the old format and then talk about how that we can pull those out into the new format. I will say this, my examples are from other states or they are specialist examples, just because we've not really been through this process yet. I've got a couple of COVID responses back from the summer, but once again, it's going to take us a year or so to get used to this. But these examples hopefully will give you an idea of where we want you to go with them. So just remember that this is your old format of the what has been done. And so we're going to, those would be, let me look at the chat box here. One of the questions in the chat box was, do we have 4-H examples? Yes, there are 4-H examples. The second part of that question was how to show economic impact with 4-H. And one of my examples does have economic impact, and then the other one doesn't. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the 4-H examples. Anyway, the old format, this is where you would talk about your activities, what's been done, and then you had that comment section. So this is just basically, this is a very, let me step back and say, I did a very poor job of trying to go from the old and try to craft a response based on what had been done in the past. I mean, it really is a completely different format. So I'm not going to spend any time on it, but basically we're just going from, you putting all these into, the chart there, and then you writing in bullet points down here, to just mainly writing in paragraphs, talking about what's been done. Same thing with that impact and results. Here on the old system, they pulled in, once again, for SCS agents, they should pull in again this year for Super. And then they talk about specifically what's been done. And you just basically want to pull out the big things that go and talk, as succinctly and briefly as possible about impact. Once again, this is just trying to pull from the old one and give it a new format. Not necessarily saying this is a good or a bad way to do it, but just to kind of give you a picture of what we're wanting. And then public value statement. This one is 2 sentences. Remember, we want 1 to 2 sentences, just talking about wanting to improve health outcomes for county residents. So here are the better examples here for the new format. So the title of this impact statement was Improving Food Access for SNAP Recipients Through Fresh Farmers Market Fresh. And so their relevant statement was talking about chronic diseases, heart diseases, excess burden that cost Tennessee in 2015, and then talking about what research has shown, and then to address these issues, UT Extension is reaching out to SNAP recipients through this program called Farmers Market Fresh. So the response was they presented an interactive exhibit and food demonstration at 22 different markets. They included 223 social media posts. And then they developed recipes and included 129 different food demonstrations. So for this one, it would be very easy to do bulleted there. It might be a little bit easier to read. So you could do that, or you can write in the paragraph form like she did. That's completely up to you. So as a result, an estimated over 249,000 adults were reached. And then she tells me that 96% eat more fruits and vegetables. And then she's got in parentheses 411 out of 429. So again, going back, that's what we want to see, is that specific number. Once again, it would have been beneficial for a bullet form for the results as well. And she also tells that, I may have said this, but she did a survey. So she included how she gathered that information. And then the public value statement, and this is one that was done last year whenever we were thinking that public value had to have an economic value associated with it. This one was still accepted to the National Impact Database, but with the encouragement that in the future, we don't specifically put the savings. So for this one, if I was going to critique it, I would move that $42 million in savings from my public value statement, and I would put it in my results section. And when you get my PowerPoint, you will see the notes that I have, and it will, tell you how I would critique this or what I would do differently for you all. So in, the public value statement here would be decrease in long-term health care costs for conditions such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancers. Again, we would move that economic value back to the results section. So here is a Yoga for Kids example. And just talking about, this is a COVID response, and the agent talked about the current environment with COVID and the special need for certain topics for dealing with stress with kids. And so the Yoga for Kids programming was developed. In her response, they talk about that the Family Consumer Science and the 4-H agent, they partnered with the local library. They did a Zuzian yoga book for kids and then did exercises there and told them how that it helped with reduced stress and anxiety. So the results for that one were that it reached 264 digital contacts. Participants now can utilize techniques learned to help calm themselves when they become nervous. And then the agent made 600 bags for the school feeding program. So the public value statement here would be the program provided strategies for kids to learn and handle stress and uncomfortable situations. That 600 bags is already in the results section. So you would just skip over to the yoga routine was put into each bag for the students to help them get exercise with stress and anxiety. So the public value statement is not reinventing the wheel at all on that. And I will say this once again, it's sometimes hard with these examples because we're having to go back to specialists that may not always necessarily translate to your programs, but just keep in mind kind of the format that we're wanting. And again, next year, the plan is to have a training using your all's impact statements that you put in this year. And we're going to go through and do ways to, we can improve these or change this and change that. So moving on to an A&R agent one. Old example, remember your individual annual plan, what's been done, those activities again. Once again, I did a bad job of trying to and put it into this new format. It's just a whole different mindset. But, that would be a way that you could do the results for this, talk about it a little bit, bullet it a little bit, and then go further. So the public value statement here would be that economic benefits to the program has an impact on consumer knowledge and beautification. That could be a public value statement there. Again, the economic benefit, we'll need to pull it back to the results section. Oh, and that come in twice. Okay, so here's a specialist example for A&R. So relevance, challenges facing the beef industry range from the adoption of very basic management practices to health management that impact profitability. The response, this specialist took all the information that you all put in your impact statements and come up with, there's been over 32,000 hours of research-based educational programming that reached more than 8,400 Tennessee beef producers. It tells me in their response what management practices were specifically taught, that they improve genetics, handling facilities, fencing. It is very detailed, but doesn't give me a laundry list of what was going on. So the results, total economic impact of the UT Beef Cattle Extension Program was $49.2 million. Then we have the specific numbers here. Public value is UT Extension beef programming for beef cattle production and management continue to enhance the lives and livelihood of Tennessee beef cattle producers. To begin with, once again, going back to whenever I initially thought that a public value statement had to have a dollar sign associated with it, we went back and forth with that database, thinking that we could have that. We thought that 49.2 million, that was a huge public value to the state of Tennessee, and they kept sending it back and kept sending it back. And finally, they just said, listen, take out that monetary value and just say basically what we said. And it finally got approved. So something as simple as that one sentence is all they're looking for in a public value statement. So once again, just don't try to reinvent the wheel, don't overthink it, just a simple sentence, 2 at the most, of what's going on in your program and how it can impact the greater good. So this is a response from a agent. I don't have the relevance because this was one that was put in about a week or so ago, and they asked me to look at it. I had their permission to use it. Hopefully you all can identify who it is. But anyway, I don't have the relevance, but this can kind of give you an idea of what type of response we're looking for. So they briefly tell a little bit in a paragraph of what they have done, and they've used approved resources and technologies to conduct programs. And then they go into bullets and tell me exactly what programs they have done. And then they briefly talk about the specifics of that program. And these are tied to their outcome indicators. So it's important, you can list things in your response. Once again, we don't want a laundry list. This is actually probably too many, but they all tie into their outcome indicators. So if you can justify your activities in the response with your outcome indicators, it's okay to have a list this long, okay? So results, they talk about how many beef producers that they had. They had an economic impact of over $750,000 in increased revenue and savings. They told me how many beef producers did different outcome indicators there. And then at the very bottom, they tell me about their specific survey that they did. So out of 34 producers, they went down and told me that 2 out of 34, 5 out of 34, et cetera. You can read that and see that. So once again, as long as your activities and your results match, that's what we're looking for. And then public value, UT Extension programming for beef cattle production and management continued to enhance the lives and livelihoods of Tennessee beef cattle producers. For this specific one, we had the specific county. So Clover County programming for beef cattle production and management, that was the public value statement. We just want something short and simple and show how it impacts the greater good.
Hannah.
So, yes, ma'am.
Hannah, this is Linda. Will you go back to the response?
Okay, you were breaking up. Go back to the response. Response on which one? I'm sorry.
The fonts that you had. The one that you're, the beef one more.
One more, okay. This one.
No, go one more. That one. Would you, meetings like the production meeting, no, go back to the, where they were showing the meetings.
Oh, this one. That's,
the next slide.
this one on the results.
Linda, we've lost you. Your screen's locked up and we can't hear you. So you might have to turn your video off if you're hearing us. See if we can pick you back up. She may not be hearing us now either.
Let me see if I can send her.
And I think you might have to go on and we'll go back and catch that. I'm gonna
Oh.
send her a text and tell her we'll go back when she jumps back in, okay?
Oh, okay, sounds like a plan. So now we're going to jump into some 4-H examples. And these are, 4-H is hard to get an economic impact. A lot of times we are right now limited to basically the volunteer hour dollars and being able to associate that with those. And so one of these examples has that in there. Again, so the first one, I'm going to talk about some good things and some bad things with it. And then the second one is what I feel like is a pretty good example for 4-H. So the first one, we're just going to talk about responsible citizenship. And so the relevance of that is talking about research from the Appalachian Regional Commission indicates that there's a growing need for citizenship training and focusing on understanding others, accepting differences, and volunteering. You all can read all that, but that's the relevant statement. The response is that youth were engaged in developing citizenship skills through workshop trainings and civic engagement. That's a great first sentence. Where I start getting a little bit of heartburn is on that second sentence. It's over 2 million contacts were made through meetings, demonstrations, and community service learning projects. What I think would be beneficial here would have been to maybe done some bullets and told me specifically how many contacts were made through meetings, how many were made through demonstrations, and then community service projects. And maybe also explained a little bit more, what did those meetings do or what did those demonstrations do? The community service learning project collected toothpaste at Congress, things of that nature whenever you're thinking about your response. So we do want it to be short and succinct and to the point, but maybe not this short, okay? So results, it talks about 15 short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals were used. And then that's a great introductory sentence there. And then I love how they've bulleted pointed, but it go back to what I've been saying over and over. I don't want to only see percentages. You can include 90% reported that they believe that people were working together, but in parentheses or somewhere in there, I want to see 9 out of 10 or, some way that we can quantify the percentages. I want to be able to see those specific numbers. So the public value statement is Tennessee 4-H All-Stars performed over 300,000 hours of service to benefit the community with an economic value of 7.7 million. Like I talked about in that other example, pull this public value statement back to your results. And then your public value statement could just be simply the Tennessee 4-H All-Stars provided a service to the community and talk maybe about your demonstrations, your service learning projects. Don't include monetary values in that public value statement. So this would be one that we would take this public value statement, put it into the results. We need those numbers, glad to have them, but just don't put them in the public value statement.
Hey,
Okay.
Hannah, can I ask the question?
Yes, sir.
What entity or whom is really driving wanting this public value statement in this form? If that's something that's good to talk about. Always
Absolutely.
helps if you understand why or whom wants something the way we're doing it, because that is hard for us to get adjusted to what you're describing.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, I'm economic background. And so when I saw public value statement, I thought, oh boy, this is where we're going to put in our financial indicators and show that return on investment there. But when we started sending these And that's how that's how we approached the specialist impact statements last year, is if they didn't have an economic value in that public value statement, we'd flag it and ask them to work with us to rewrite it. And so we started submitting these to that land grant database, which is kind of a subsidiary of USDA and managed by USDA. And they started kicking them back, and they started saying, we don't want to see economic values in your public value statement. We just need that simple sentence of decreased, increase, did X, Y, Z. So this is being really pushed from that land grant database that we submit these impact statements to.
We didn't shoot our own self in the foot. That's what I'm getting at.
Right, no, absolutely not.
It's somebody else that's a report that's handing us money, that's telling us how they want it. That's the key I wanted to make sure everybody understood. We're not trying to do it because we have the ability to say, do them this way and mess you up on what you've learned. It's because our funders have said, this is how we want it.
Absolutely. That's it. And I will be honest, whenever I'm looking at your impact statements for reporting, I don't look at your public value statement. I mean, I do for, of course, that land grant impact database, but whenever we do the big report and do our plan of work, I'm more interested in your outcome indicators, what your economic value was, so we can generate that economic impact report, and your contacts. That's what I'm the most concerned about. And I guess, to be honest, that's why it's taken us so long to try to get our head around a public value statement, is because it's just so different from what we've been used to in the past.
Can I ask a question for next year? To me, public value statement is something that all of Extension nationwide should have. Are we just going to pick certain ones, like for COVID, if you were making masks, it was to mitigate the spread of, or to practice social distancing, so that we'd all cluster? And because I think that's the end result, isn't it?
It is, yes, ma'am. And that's what we're working with our work groups and our leadership teams that work with our outcome indicators and help develop those. The next goal for those work groups are to create public value statements to be associated with those outcome indicators. That way we're all on the same page using the same one. It might, we're not sure that we'll have that ready by next year, but we should have it ready by 2022 is the plan.
Yeah, that sort of brings a question up. If you're going to make a blank value statement that's going to be submitted, what's the point in all of us creating a value statement? I mean, not that it's hard. I was just wondering. I was trying to connect that.
And you've not been the only one to ask that. Western Region had the exact same concerns and questions. And to be honest, I think it's just, we've just got to practice writing these, I guess, in case somebody was to ask us, that we can say, yes, our agents did write a public value statement. And then going forward, then we'll have those outline procedures, if you will, that says it's going to be just like our outcome indicators. We'll have those public values associated with it, and they can pull from a bank. We just don't have those in place yet.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, we have to document everything that we report and be able to, say why we have done certain things in case somebody was to come back and audit us or ask more specific questions. And I think a lot of it goes back to, we're just still trying to wrap our head around this, and we weren't 100% prepared of what all the public value statements were going to look like for this reporting year. So hopefully we can refine that going forward. So on this last 4-H example, this is just talking about, this is a 4-H example about a county or a group of counties that had a statewide or a national winning, skillathon team. And so their relevance is, they're talking about that livestock has become a major part of the state of Clover, and the county extension councils have been urging that we strengthen that development of livestock programs throughout the state. And we have done that through livestock programs, judging contests, and skillathon contests. And so the response was, they, for provided a framework for youth to learn a variety of topics on management of different species of livestock, and told exactly specifically what each of those modules in those skillathons were. And then they also talk about those 4-Hers visiting specific farms and businesses and using research-based resources to prepare. And then they talked about the different ages that they tried to attract, or they targeted there with their different programs. Then the results were, I mean, you can read this, there's necessarily no outcome indicators associated with this one, but it just talks about that, you know, in the past 2 years, that their past 15 years, they've won a national competition twice. And it was from Head, Heart, Hands, and Health counties that they won the national competition. And then the team that graduated, those individuals are pursuing degrees in veterinary medicine and animal science. And so it sometimes goes back to being able to capture, it's hard to capture that economic impact on our 4-Hers, because sometimes we don't know the type of economic impact they're going to have until they've already left the program. So it's sometimes hard to be able to quantify that. But the public value statement for that is when you support extension, 4-H youth gain knowledge to aid their science, technology, engineering, and math in pursuit of professional careers. And so that could be applied to basically any of our STEM programs in 4-H, not necessarily just a livestock. So that's all the examples that I have. I will send you all this PowerPoint. I'll send you the link to that land grant database so you all can go in there and look and see how other states have formatted it and give you an idea. Also know that I'm here to help you as well as your program leaders. I'll do whatever I can to help you as we're trying to learn this new process. So with that, and welcome to ask me questions. I'm going to go shift gears and go over to super too, but you all can ask me questions while I try to get over to that. And I know this was a lot of information to try to get out in 2 hours. That's so can you all see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay. And David, if you'll jump in here with me on the base programs and plan programs, it should.
Can you open a base one up there so we can visually talk about what
Let me see if I can.
we're going to do?
And I may have to turn it over to you because I can't impersonate someone.
Well, just go act like you're going to, can you act like you're going to create one?
I can't create one either.
Can't create one. Ty, are you at a spot where you can act like you're going to create one and share it?
Let me see if I can do that. Just a second.
You work on that while, if you can do that, and let me share with the group, because what we're talking about is these, your impact statement. You're going to have one for each of your planned programs. Many and most of you only have one planned agenda, but you'll have multiple base program impact statements. Jacob Boone, I'll use you as an example for me, because you've got A&R, 4-H, community economic development, and as county director, you're going to have the executive. I can't remember if you only have 1 or 2 planned agendas, but so you'll have at least an impact statement for that planned agenda, and then you're going to have 4 base program impact statements. Within each of these impact statements, there's those 4 parts, the 3 R's and the public value statement. For your planned, your plans or those agendas, that impact statement will populate that relevance or that issue. It's going to come right in. You don't have to really do anything with it. Where your really putting all the effort in is what you've done and what the impacts are. And then you're going to wordsmith a public value statement, or you're going to call Linda, Nancy, and Ty or Hannah and say, help me with this as to what we're going to put in there, because there has to be something in all four of those boxes. But for your base programs, those impact statements, you again have to have something in the 4 boxes, but all Hannah's going to look for is in the middle 2. It's basically what you did and the results. So in that relevance, you can just go in there and you have to add something. But what we've sent out is just to type in the word or the letter N/A. And the same thing for the public value statement is just to go in and write N/A. And that'll let it save, and we'll know it's good. So Ty, are you at a spot where you can show one of those and they can see what we're talking about?
So David, I can create one, but my screen is not going to have a plan to go with it. So I asked Nancy if she could throw hers on for us for just a minute, and it'll look a lot like what any of you should be seeing on your screen as well. So she's going to pull that up.
Okay. Hannah's, hopefully this is going to be helpful for everyone for us to go through this so they can see what we're talking about. So I think, Nancy, if you've got it.
While Nancy's pulling that up, I'll address one of the questions that was in the chat box asking about uploading images. And you absolutely can upload images this year in your Super 2 module.
And that's one image per impact statement, right?
Correct. And also, I think this is probably goes without saying, but make sure especially if you're a 4-H agent, make sure you've got those members' permission to use those, because hopefully I think the goal is to use it for a bigger project in the end. So we want to make sure that we have permission to use those photos.
So Nancy's got her agent impact statement.
You may need to walk me through where I need to go about what you're looking for.
Okay, so Nancy, what we want to do is, can you open your impact statement that matches your agenda?
So I think we need to go to delivery homepage to find your impact statement if you've already created it. So that's one important point, so everybody knows where to find those.
Search your impact. Yeah, go to delivery home and see there is your workforce prep agenda. And see, so you can click, you actually, I think, just want to click your 4-H workforce prep over to the left.
The impact statement should show up at the bottom of the page.
That's all of what I want to show there. That's all of those activities where you've put in delivery. That's what you're going to find if you click that. Because if you're hunting for these and you say, this don't look right, it's right, but it's not what you're hunting for impact statements. You got to keep on coming down through there. So yeah, now down here at the bottom is your workforce prep impact statement. But you can click on that. And now if you look at that relevance, that is the agent issue statement. That's what transferred over from your 2020 plan that you created back in 2019. So what you have written is in the results, the response, and the public value sectors. Now, Hannah, this year it's got all of this unusual stuff. I'm assuming everyone's agenda is going to have that unusual stuff in that relevance for that planned impact statement, right?
Yes, they are all going to look like that. And you all are welcome to go in and edit it if you want to, or you can leave it.
Leave it alone.
Leave it.
Leave it. Don't mess with it because it's not accomplishing anything. Where your effort goes is response results and wordsmith you a public value statement. Now, Nancy, can you open a base program impact statement of yours, please? Linda, did you get to join us back?
Yeah, for now.
Good.
Till my internet goes back out.
All right. Now, right there, the relevance. See, you've actually went in and typed something in that box, but here's what we're saying. You can just put N/A in that, and same under the public value statement for your base program impact statements for this year.
But they could leave that.
They could leave that.
I mean, she's got that and that's fine, but they don't have to do that.
Right. But she had to type that in there. It didn't,
Yeah.
it does not
Yeah.
populate
It
anywhere.
doesn't come from anywhere.
You may have something to add that's very appropriate, it's easy to do, but if it's a stressor and takes large amounts of time,
Yeah, don't do it.
your effort of time, resources in response and results. That's where Hannah's going to go and look. Now, Hannah, is that matching with what I want to make sure? Are we matching the similar instructions that is being said in Western and Central region? So I don't want folks to call across region line and say, oh, that don't at all match what we're being told there, because we're trying to be consistent.
Yes.
You're my common denominator here to make sure we're right. I know Jerry and Jim and I have talked, but I know how we get straight off.
And you are spot on. That's the way that it's been instructed across the regions for that base program, and then for county directors, put NA and public value and NA in your relevance.
All right. So
Once again, I mean, just look at, I only look at relevance and results.
all right. So Nancy, thank you for being don't turn it off yet. Let's see if somebody has any specific questions that we need to pull anything up there that they can actually see.
Now,
Here's where you can put your file.
yeah. And then go down and no, go back down. Click on select keywords. So those are the same keywords that are in the other sections. And I think one of the things to note under community economic development, if it was something in direct response to COVID, you want to check that, right, Hannah and David?
Yes, please.
If it's something you did in direct response to it, not changing delivery methods for a program or anything, but if it was something you did in direct response.
And when you're selecting a keyword, it doesn't mean that the whole plan goes along with that keyword, but that there's an element in the plan that does
Right.
correspond to that keyword.
Impact statement, Ty. Impact statement,
Impact statement, sorry.
not plan. And recognize what Linda said. If you went from doing a face-to-face delivery method to a virtual Zoom method, that's not what we're talking about. That's direct COVID response. It's a program that you initiated and delivered in 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. Now, Hannah, let's see what questions anybody has here that we need to go look at.
Okay, this is James. Just for clarification, we do not need to put in relevance or a public statement.
For your
In-
base program
Base,
impact statements, base only.
Okay, so for my
The-
plan, I do need to put in.
And remember, the relevance will come, it will automatically populate from what you put in your plan the previous year. So that section is taken care of. So it's the public value statement is the new piece that you have to do for that planned impact statement. And it's 1 or 2 sentences. And that's
Not
if you
too long.
have difficulty with that, that's where myself, Ty, Linda, Nancy, or Hannah, if you need help and say, gosh, I'm just not getting it.
And go back, I assume we're recording this and then we're going to send out the PowerPoint, and she went over the public value
So
statement.
David, I have a question about, I guess it's compiling or bulleting. Let's say for 4-H agents, you chose workforce prep, and as part of your relevance or issue, you had your things are going to be, you're going to teach public speaking to prepare them for college. They're going to be doing this and participating in On My Own. Like Nancy's sample was based for On My Own. So you had maybe 5 programs that were all part of workforce prep. Can you just bullet them there so you just have one major impact statement?
You only can have one major impact statement. So yes, you can bullet them, separate them succinctly out. Just remember, when you're in there in that drafting and writing mode, that sector for what you did only has 6,000 characters. Now that's a fair amount, but you can't just start writing novels, because it will make you say, gosh, I got to redo that work. So think about that as you prepare.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify, because when you were using Jacob's example, but that was base, you might say
that was
4.
base, right?
Okay.
He's going to have 4 base program impact statements. But all of those things that you said you were going to do in your plans for coming year, for your plan, you need to mention those in what you did here. So open that workforce prep impact statement back up. So that would be what would be in your response, what you did. And if you said you were going to do 5 separate programs related to workforce prep, you would go down through there and see Nancy has sort of segmented those by paragraph, whether they're paragraph, whether they're bullet, whatever you need to do, Connie. And then what happened, how many of them, how many people and whatever, see what they gained is over in that results section.
But
All right, for this year, if we did not get to them, what do you want?
Just say that,
Yep.
just say that, because a lot of things that you had planned, you didn't get done, and we know that.
And that's just like you've always done, James. If let's say we're going to do public speaking, ethical decision making, and citizenship. I'm just throwing 3 things out. Citizenship was going about Congress. We didn't do that. So you're just going to say, I didn't do any of the programming for that particular part. And that's fine.
Yeah. And I think one thing is to go back through, or what I've heard is, and look at how you can make it very succinct, because all those words, when you start writing out all of this stuff, it takes up those characters.
And recognizing we've been doing impact statements for the last decade. For anybody that's worked 10 years or more or less, even at least worked for 1 year, you've done an impact statement. So what you put in, and you did a plan, what was in that plans for coming year, that ties directly to the response, because here's what I really did. All right. And then the results part, see, in the old format was where you typed down in that box that said impacts after those outcome indicators is the results piece. And we know that some of those outcome indicators are going to automatically populate in here for your plan. Some are not. And if you haven't opened it yet, I can't tell you positively. And I don't know that Hannah can tell you positively what's going to pop in there or not. So,
well, and that was my question, because in the old system, you had to input your data under outcomes, not in impact statements. So where are they going to show? Do you know, Hannah?
I do not know. I hope Hannah knows.
Let me make sure I understand. You're asking about where your outcome indicators are going to populate.
No,
right. Where do they put in the data?
Yeah, where they put the data in them, and then where are they going to populate?
And then where do they show
at?
up? Because we've not seen that.
That's a good question. I guess I assumed that everybody was still inputting in their outcomes in the old super, and they were communicating together.
If that's the only place they can do it, I guess that's correct. But
Nancy, if you open workforce preparation impact statement, at the bottom of it, does it give you a spot for the outcomes? If you go ahead and open that one up.
That was going to be my question. There is a
down
button down there
below.
that says outcome statements, how
Right
to
there.
match those, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Yeah, so you can
So
add
click on that,
outcome statements
Nancy.
right there to your impact statement.
click the little blue arrow right here that says select statements, and let's see if that's what they are.
Well,
So
no,
we've got
you have to
a
select the topic
Oh,
first.
sorry.
Pick one.
I was already ahead one step.
You're ready to go there. All right.
There they
it
are.
is.
So can you edit them and put the numbers in?
I think you can add them once they're in your relevance or in your results part. Should be able to.
So it's,
There they are.
there it is.
See, this was useful,
Yeah.
real useful. Did you do this for the other two regions, Hannah?
Did not. So this might be something that we need to follow up with them.
I think you're going to need to do something probably this sort of like maybe you got all the animals in the corral, but we're still running. We're trying to break out. This needs to go to everybody across the state. How to do this. If you could give us a tip sheet, how to go pop this in. 'Cause
So
this-
Nancy, okay, and then click that. So let's do another one because we've had people asking. So go back. No, go all the way back. There you go. So you're in delivery home. Go to your impact statement, workforce prep. Scroll down. Oh, look at that.
Ooh, it brought them in. See,
Manage in, there we go. Manage outcome statements. Select your topic, and all of you will have selected topics. That's from your plan. And then, but now Nancy, wait, before you go on. If you didn't select all, well, scroll down. Is it putting them all in there? That's what I want to know.
It did last time.
Okay.
but it looks like you can select individual outcome indicators and only those you
Well, but
pop.
scroll down. You're not what I want to know. No, not
This
on
is-
that one. On
This
the-
is my last, my last ones are down here. These are the
But
ones.
go up, go back up. Okay, there's a scroll bar right in where it says long-term, short-term. But there's a scroll bar there. Are there more?
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
yeah.
if it doesn't look like if you selected specific ones, it doesn't look like it's filtered those. So you may have to go back and look at your plan and see what
Right.
you selected in your plan and make sure it matches so that, because if you select all, but it wasn't in your plan, I mean, you could, but you
It'll
can,
show up as 0. I mean, you don't.
yeah, and we don't want zeros.
So
The other
Yeah.
part, let me go back and help out where James said, what if we don't do something? Let's just say exactly right there. Nancy had 3 of those life skills that she was going to work on. And because of what we had to change this year, you didn't do one of those. So you would write in one of those boxes where you can type, I didn't do this piece. And then you would not select those outcome indicators because you have no data to fill it
Yeah.
out. And that's going
Don't
to be fine.
select them.
And that's
Yeah.
going to be fine. But Hannah, this would be very useful as a little instruction tip sheet here with some of the screenshots to get to everybody across the state to know how to pull these in. Because this was the
Yeah.
part I've been waiting on while I got in today, other than talking
Yeah.
about that base program impact.
But-
How do we do this?
We've never seen this. So Amber was asking Sarah Kite, does that help you now to see where to do that and how to do it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're good. Glad to
It
hear
might
that.
still be a little bit crude, but at least we got there. That's
Yeah.
Hey,
'cause
David,
that
this,
was the,
this is Connie again. Earlier in the year, I talked to Ty and I had talked to Anthony. These impacts never showed up on our old program. So like, for example, for On My Own this year, I only got to do 63 kids in February before COVID in person. So I took all of their surveys and made Excel spreadsheets. Same thing for public speaking and these things. So that all I'll have to do is take them from my Excel spreadsheets. So I don't think anybody has this on the old system because it never showed up on mine for us to input any of this.
yeah,
So
it's, yeah, I think you've inputted impact outcomes in the past, Connie, because if you hadn't, we would have said there needs to be outcomes.
I have in the past, but not this year. The system's not letting it show up. So I said,
Well, now it is, and we had
Yeah,
said
that's what
and
I'm
told
saying.
people, yeah.
If you
Healthcare
didn't save the data
will be-
somewhere else, you're gonna have to manually put it in. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to manually put it in. It doesn't export it from anywhere.
So for the agriculture extension agents, now you'll see where you want to select the new outcomes that I emailed out this morning. So you'll see the old ones and the new ones as you're doing your impact statement. So I think that's going to make more sense. And when it comes to your base programs, you'll have all of those outcome indicators to choose from based on what topic areas you're working in. And so that will give you a lot more options. And we do encourage you to report outcomes in your base programs if you have some that you can report on. It's not a requirement, but that is part of the performance appraisal. So you can take advantage of that, I think, really well now with this new system.
Yeah, so there is a way to put outcomes in, and especially, you know, I know in FCS, there are several of you that have programs and base programs that have that outcome indicators. So we want to make sure we get them in there. And Connie was talking about On My Own, and a lot of you may have done that or not done that, but you want to make sure that you get that entered. And then also there's a keyword associated with On My Own, so you want to make sure you choose that.
I have a question. I guess it's more for Linda and David and Ty and Nancy, but you know, you all said that a COVID response was not taking an in-person class to a virtual class. But one class that comes to mind for me is co-parenting. And, you know, most of the judges around here, they didn't want virtual before COVID, just because of the way the law was written and they understood it. And now because I approached them because of COVID and asking to do it on Zoom, wouldn't that be considered, and them saying, yes, we'll accept that certificate if they do it via Zoom? Wouldn't that be a response?
Yeah, that is not a program that was in direct response to COVID. That's delivery method. So you can report that as a response, but it wouldn't be a direct response.
And it's just a matter of how those keywords are designated, that it's really programs that directly relate to COVID, like service projects making masks or health related programs.
Yeah. The mask project would be a direct response to COVID. But changing and you can report that as a success. I mean, you can report that as a result because that's significant, but it wouldn't be in direct response. It wasn't that we developed co-parenting or teaching co-parenting as a direct response to COVID.
But that's a good question.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing, but I mean, if we said it was delivery method, we could report everything, and that's not really, when we are going to have to report that, and Hannah's going to have to write that. Those are, that's not something we taught that was because COVID happened or did because of COVID.
Another question. So you talked about the face masks, but what if some of us in our counties, we work together to get those face masks? Who's going to report it in, or do both of us report it in our impact statements?
Yes.
Or
report it as multi-county? Yes. Okay. Report it in your base impact statements. Work together.
And Linda, I reported that earlier when they asked in March or April, they sent certain emails to certain one of us. So Elizabeth, I've already got that in there for us.
Good. And that would be marked as direct COVID. That would be marked under that community economic development, that keyword. And Nancy had hers, and you could see it said the keyword was direct COVID response.
So Hannah, now that we shanghaied your impact training, what do you need to do next?
That was all I had. If anybody has any questions, we're welcome to ask. Linda, did you want to? I couldn't hear you a while ago. Did you want to?
My internet. The question I had was on that, and you don't have to bring it up. I'll just, on that A&R one where they were showing all of those meetings, they've done this meeting and direct meeting and all that. Would you, because you wanted to know participants, would you want to know the participants at those meetings when they did it in that list? It wasn't there, and that's what I wanted to know.
Yes, ma'am. If they can tell us the number of participants in
Okay.
each of those individual meetings, that would be very
Okay.
helpful.
Okay.
And then also specifically, if you do a survey, be sure whenever, you don't have to tell me, 31 out of 34 for every sentence. For that first introductory sentence, if you want to say 34 participants filled out this survey and then bullet it and say, 2 individuals said they saved $1. That's fine. I have that reference point to say 2 out of 34. I just need to be able to verify somewhere within that relevance, or excuse me, that results section, how many people were there or completed your survey.
Okay, so that's something we've not really emphasized before. So that's a little bit different when you're doing that. So remember that, sharing those, like who numbers participated, and then the numbers that were surveyed.
Folks, I know this is a change, and as you can see, we're sort of learning as we go. Sort of like flying the plane. They've got a pilot and a co-pilot, but we might not have everything exactly glued and bolted in. So we're tightening as we are in air, and recognize that I don't want you to have fret over them. It is something that we've got to complete, but feel free to call and ask questions, and we may or may not have the most precise answer. And as Hannah said, this is a experimental year of doing them. It's the right year to do them because everything we've started this year has had modification and change to it. So don't let it bother you to the utmost degree that you sweat over it. I mean, we'll get through it. And I think Hannah can help us out by coming in and preparing a few more screenshots to help us on how to get those impact statements or those outcome indicators in there, because that's something we've got to do. And just recognize, the one that's fully fleshed out is your agenda. That's got to, and then we've got to complete those base program ones, if for all those assigned areas. But we'll work through those, and we'll make the best of it, because at least then Hannah's got to go in here and summarize all this and complete those reports. So what last questions does anybody have of her or us? Hannah, you need one more poll. You could put everybody knows how to do it all, and a yes or no, right?
That's right.
I don't want you to put that poll out there right now, because we're all in that boat that,
I don't think I could answer it that I knew it all.
I can't either. So that's why I want everybody to know that I don't know that we've got the full handle on it all yet, but we'll get there as we move through. And I'll let you take it wherever you want to go now.
All right. Well, if anybody, if there's no more questions, we'll let you go. But once again, just thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. I know it was a lot of information in 2.5 hours, and know that I'm here to help you. If just feel free to email me or call me, whatever works best for you, and I'll help you any way that I can.
So Hannah, you're going to send that to your PowerPoint. You're going to send that to Ty.
Yes.
And get that sent out. Okay.
And I'll go ahead and send that here in just a few minutes, and then I'll send out the screenshots for the outcome indicators probably tomorrow, but I'll go ahead and get you all that PowerPoint.
Yeah, that'd be good, so they could have it if they want to refresh their information.
And we'll have this recording online. I'll share that out with probably tomorrow. Take a little time to upload to YouTube, but we'll have that online for you to view or go back and check out if you need to.
And can we put that on with TTNT where all our other training is? So
We'll
it'll be
definitely
there.
get it on there.
Okay, good. You all know how to do that. I don't. So Hannah, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you all for asking me.
Thank you.
All right, Hannah, thank you very much. And you probably want to share that other, that extra tidbit with Jerry and Jim so you can get that to the other regions.
I will do that.
All righty. Thank you all for everybody being on here. Thank you, Hannah, Ty, Linda, Nancy, particularly Nancy for being,
Yeah.
being our show and tell. See, that's
Go
great.
Nancy.
Everybody have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.